get our students whose first language is not English to be performing at the same level. And I guess what I'm interested in, a couple things that you talked about. You talked about these kids with really only 2 levels of any kind of English language support, and you kind of stopped at the at the B1 level. That's kind of where they are. And I'd love to know whether there are any plans to look at these kids beyond that, because one of the issues that we have here is kids basically plateauing. English language learners, they get to the point where, yes, they can communicate and everybody thinks, hey, they're just like native speakers. And yet what we know in their academic learning is that they're not able to get the academic language that they need to perform at the higher levels that are expected. And I guess it would be interesting from the standpoint of those of us in this country that work in that area to see what happens to these kids beyond B1.
Right. Well, we haven't got any immediate plans for that kind of research. But what you might be interested in is the work that we've been doing, which I wasn't going to talk about at all, but since you raised the question, I will, with secondary level learners. When the kids come, they're born in Ireland in a non-English speaking family, or they come at preschool age into the country, they come into school. One of my former students is principal of a girls' primary school in the west of Dublin, where there's a large population. She now has routinely 80+% of kids coming to school, not simply with English, not as the language of the whole. They can't speak a word of English at the beginning of school. Most of them are performing at the age of 7 or 8. We have these standardized tests. You can't identify them as a subgroup or whatever in those tests. So obviously that's working quite well. And that's, I think, reflected in Brony Chadabuzic's research. At the post-primary level, for a variety of reasons, it's not so good. And we also got a lot of money from one of the banks, and we used it for something called the Trinity Immigration Initiative. And we had a number of projects. One of them was on education, but in terms of social cohesion and the social processes of education. And the one that I had, there were 6 projects altogether, focused on ESL, but at post-primary level. And you may be interested to take down the URL that's not on the handout, which is www. As it always is, ELSP for English Language Support Program, ELSP.IE. Our starting point in developing this project was the difficulty, all kinds of difficulties having to do with age and everything else, but a prime difficulty at post-primary level is that you don't have class teachers, you have subject teachers. And the subject teachers are very impatient of the difficulty that they're confronted with, typically. Also, though, in the end, if kids are going to master academic language, they're going to master it in the academic classroom, not in some separate English language class. So we were looking for a way of supporting their development through the 3 levels that I've been talking about, but also into B2, because we identified B2 as what you need if you're a second language speaker or language of schooling. You need to be a secure, productive B2 user of English to perform well in the school leaving exams and progress into 3rd level if that's what you want. And then we thought, well, what do we actually know about these different subjects? The language of history, the language of geography, and so on. And we talked to teachers, and they told us stuff that was A, crazy, and B, couldn't make any sense. You all talk to a history teacher here, and history, you've got 2 completely different things. And someone said to me, you'd need to go into the classrooms and record, and waste of time. What we did was to focus on the textbooks and the exams. So for each of about 8 subjects. We collected, we didn't collect, we bought, we identified the 6 most commonly used textbooks for each subject. We bought them, we chopped the spines off, we fed them into a scanner, and we built up text corpora. And so with you know, we had corpus for each textbook, we had corpus for each subject, we had and so on and so forth. And that yielded a lot of very interesting information that we simply didn't have before about these different curriculum subjects. And we used that then to fill out a template of sort of worksheets that progressed from the very beginning to B1. So tasks that could be related to those levels. And if you go to this website, you'll see for both the lower and upper secondary an enormous number. I mean, it's 30,000 worksheets or something like that that were developed out of this procedure. So the idea is not, of course, that the teacher downloads and prints out the whole of a particular history unit, but that when she's teaching a particular subject, she says, well, I've got three kids here who seem to be at this level, so these bits of the worksheets will help. So that's what we did with our share of the 2 million from the bank. And interestingly, and this links up with the whole sort of PISA thing and Bix and Calp and the difficulty that socially disadvantaged kids have with academic language and so on, the schools that we were working with particularly closely in trialling stuff and so on very quickly got onto the idea of using these same materials for the native speaker kids who were having language difficulties. And that also we were pleased with.